The warning lights painted Outpost Kepler 9 in shades of emergency red. Marcus Chen's boots echoed against the metal floor as he sprinted through the engineering corridor, his breath coming in controlled bursts. The alarm klaxon drowned out everything else, but he didn't need to hear the announcement to know what was happening. He'd been monitoring the fusion reactor's telemetry for the past 3 hours, watching the containment field degrade with the inevitability of a glacier sliding toward the sea. Behind him, Commander Kalas of the Zenthari delegation watched the human run with barely concealed disdain. The Zenthari were everything humans were not, tall, graceful, with skin that shimmered like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with an inner luminescence. They were stronger, faster, more elegant in every movement. They had been exploring the stars when Earth was still dreaming of the moon. "Your engineer moves with panic," Kalas observed to Captain Rivera, his voice carrying that musical quality all Zenthari possessed. "Perhaps we should evacuate and let this station meet its fate. A more advanced species could rebuild it properly." Captain Elena Rivera kept her expression neutral, though her jaw tightened. "Mr. Chen is our best systems engineer. If anyone can stabilize the reactor, it's him." "An engineer?" Kalas's luminescent eyes widened slightly. "I assumed he was security. He has the build of a soldier." Rivera didn't elaborate. She didn't mention that Marcus had spent 8 years in the colonial marines before mustering out to pursue engineering. Didn't mention the 3 campaigns he'd survived, or the classified missions that still gave him nightmares. The Zenthari already thought humans were soft, limited creatures who compensated for biological inadequacy with clever machines. No need to complicate their prejudices with inconvenient facts. Marcus reached the reactor chamber and pulled up the holographic display. The situation was worse than he'd thought. The primary containment field was failing, and the backup system had already burned out trying to compensate. Radiation levels in the chamber were climbing steadily. In 30 minutes, the reactor would breach, flooding this entire section with enough hard radiation to kill everyone on the station within hours. He keyed his comm. "Captain, this is Chen. I need to go inside the chamber." Static, then Rivera's voice, "Marcus, current radiation levels in there would kill you in 15 minutes. "I know. But I can manually reset the backup containment system in 10. Maybe 12 if the access panel is corroded." He was already pulling on the heavy radiation suit, checking seals with practiced efficiency. "It's the only option that doesn't end with everyone dead." More static. He could imagine the conversation happening on the command deck. The Zenthari delegation would be recommending evacuation. Rivera would be calculating odds, weighing 300 lives against 1. "Do it," Rivera said finally. "But Marcus, you have 12 minutes. Not a second more." "Understood, Captain." He sealed the helmet and approached the massive chamber doors. Through the reinforced window, he could see the fusion core's blue glow flickering erratically, like a dying star. The containment field shimmered around it, failing in patches, stabilizing briefly, then failing again. Marcus activated the door mechanism and stepped inside. Heat hit him first, even through the suit's cooling system. Then the radiation alarms on his suit started screaming. He'd been in hostile environments before, vacuum, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, but this was different. This was invisible death, particles moving so fast they tore through matter at the molecular level. He moved toward the access panel, each step deliberate. The chamber was larger than it looked from outside, filled with coolant pipes and monitoring equipment. The blue glow cast everything in an otherworldly light. His suit's radiation badge was already turning yellow. The access panel was corroded, just as he'd feared. He pulled tools from his belt and started working. His hands were steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. The Marines had taught him that panic was a luxury you couldn't afford when people depended on you. On the command deck, Kalas watched the human's biometric readings on the display. Heart rate elevated but controlled. Respiration steady. The radiation exposure climbing steadily toward lethal levels. "He will die," Kalas stated matter-of-factly. Even if he succeeds, the exposure will kill him within days. Maybe, Rivera said quietly. But he's still trying. Why? Callas turned to face her, genuinely confused. Your species is already proven inferior in every measurable way. Why sacrifice himself for a station full of beings who will die eventually anyway? It accomplishes nothing. Rivera's eyes hardened. It accomplishes saving 300 lives today. If you can't understand that, Commander, then maybe your species has evolved past something important. Inside the chamber, Marcus had the panel open. His hands worked through the reset sequence, fingers moving through the familiar motions despite the shaking that had started in his arms. The radiation badge had turned orange. His suit was starting to fail, overwhelmed by exposure levels it was never designed to handle. 9 minutes had passed. The backup system came online with a hum he felt more than heard. The containment field stabilized, expanding smoothly around the fusion core. The blue glow steadied. The chamber's radiation levels began dropping as the field re-established proper containment. Marcus allowed himself one breath of relief, then started toward the exit. His legs felt heavy, like they belonged to someone else. The shaking had spread from his arms to his entire body. His vision blurred at the edges, then cleared, then blurred again. He made it 3 steps before his legs gave out. He sealed the helmet and approached the massive chamber doors. Through the reinforced window, he could see the fusion core's blue glow flickering erratically, like a dying star. The containment field shimmered around it, failing in patches, stabilizing briefly, then failing again. Marcus activated the door mechanism and stepped inside. Heat hit him first, even through the suit's cooling system. Then the radiation alarms on his suit started screaming. He'd been in hostile environments before, vacuum, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, but this was different. This was invisible death, particles moving so fast they tore through matter at the molecular level. He moved toward the access panel, each step deliberate. The chamber was larger than it looked from outside, filled with coolant pipes and monitoring equipment. The blue glow cast everything in an otherworldly light. His suit's radiation badge was already turning yellow. The access panel was corroded, just as he'd feared. He pulled tools from his belt and started working. His hands were steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. The Marines had taught him that panic was a luxury you couldn't afford when people depended on you. On the command deck, Callas watched the human's biometric readings on the display. Heart rate elevated but controlled. Respiration steady. The radiation exposure climbing steadily toward lethal levels. He will die, Callas stated matter-of-factly. Even if he succeeds, the exposure will kill him within days. Maybe, Rivera said quietly. But he's still trying. Why? Callas turned to face her, genuinely confused. Your species is already proven inferior in every measurable way. Why sacrifice himself for a station full of beings who will die eventually anyway? It accomplishes nothing. Rivera's eyes hardened. It accomplishes saving 300 lives today. If you can't understand that, Commander, then maybe your species has evolved past something important. Inside the chamber, Marcus had the panel open. His hands worked through the reset sequence, fingers moving through the familiar motions despite the shaking that had started in his arms. The radiation badge had turned orange. His suit was starting to fail, overwhelmed by exposure levels it was never designed to handle. 9 minutes had passed. The backup system came online with a hum he felt more than heard. The containment field stabilized, expanding smoothly around the fusion core. The blue glow steadied. The chamber's radiation levels began dropping as the field re-established proper containment. Marcus allowed himself one breath of relief, then started toward the exit. His legs felt heavy, like they belonged to someone else. The shaking had spread from his arms to his entire body. His vision blurred at the edges, then cleared, then blurred again. He made it 3 steps before his legs gave out. The floor rushed up to meet him. He managed to turn his fall into a controlled collapse, years of combat training overriding the body's desire to simply shut down. On his hands and knees, the chamber spun around him. The exit door looked impossibly far away. Chen, status. Rivera's voice crackled in his helmet. Reactor, stable, he managed. Need, extraction. He started crawling. Each movement took an eternity. The radiation badge on his suit had turned red. A small, distant part of his mind noted that he'd absorbed a fatal dose. But fatal didn't mean instant. He had minutes, maybe hours. Enough time to get out. Enough time to see that everyone else was safe. The Marines had a saying, you can rest when you're dead. Until then, keep moving. Marcus kept moving. He reached the door as the medical team arrived. They pulled him through, stripped off the contaminated suit, loaded him onto a stretcher. Dr. Sarah Kim's face appeared above him, professional concern masking deeper worry. How bad? He asked. Bad enough. We're taking you to medical. Don't try to move. As they rushed him down the corridor, Marcus caught a glimpse of the Zenthari delegation. Kala stood apart from the others, his luminescent eyes fixed on Marcus with an expression that might have been respect. Or perhaps just fascination at a creature too stupid to know when it should die. Marcus closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. He woke in the medical bay 3 days later. His body felt like it had been taken apart and reassembled incorrectly, every cell screaming in protest. But he was alive, which Dr. Kim informed him was something of a miracle. The radiation damage is extensive, she explained, reviewing his charts with clinical detachment. Your bone marrow is compromised. We've started treatment, but you're looking at months of recovery. Maybe years. And there will be permanent damage. But everyone else is fine. Kim smiled slightly. Everyone else is fine. The reactor is stable. You saved the station, Marcus. That should have been the end of it. A successful rescue, a heroic engineer, life on the station returning to normal. But the Zenthari had other ideas. Commander Kalos requested a formal meeting with Captain Rivera on the 5th day. Marcus, still confined to medical but recovering faster than anyone expected, watched the proceedings via video feed. Your engineer's actions were unexpected, Kalos began, choosing his words carefully. They have prompted discussion among my delegation. I'm glad Marcus could change your perspective, Rivera said diplomatically. Changed, yes. But not concluded. Kalos leaned forward, his obsidian skin reflecting the conference room lights. My people require proof of strength before accepting partnership. What we witnessed was impressive self-sacrifice, but self-sacrifice can be interpreted as weakness. A strong species survives. It does not throw away its best members. Rivera's expression hardened. What are you proposing, Commander? A trial. A formal demonstration of human capability. Our champion against yours, in single combat. Unarmed, until one yields or falls unconscious. It is how the Zenthari have resolved questions of worth for millennia. The room fell silent. Everyone present understood the implications. The Zenthari were physically superior to humans in every measurable way. A formal combat trial would be a massacre. And if we refuse? Rivera asked quietly. Kalas spread his hands. Then my people will recommend against the alliance. The Zenthari do not partner with those who cannot prove their strength. In the medical bay, Marcus watched the exchange with growing certainty. He knew what was coming. Knew it with the same instinct that had kept him alive through 3 campaigns and a dozen classified missions. He pulled off the medical monitors, ignoring Dr. Kim's protests, and made his way to the conference room. His body protested every step, radiation damage leaving him weaker than he'd been since basic training. But he'd been weak before. He'd been outmatched, outgunned, and outnumbered. He was still here. Marcus entered the conference room as Rivera was formulating a response. Every head turned toward him. "I'll do it," Marcus said simply. "Marcus, you can barely stand," Rivera objected. "I can stand well enough." He turned to face Callas directly. "You're champion. Tomorrow. I accept your trial." For the first time since arriving at the station, Commander Callas smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Excellent. Tomorrow at noon, in the cargo bay. We will make the necessary preparations." He paused, studying Marcus with those luminescent eyes. "You understand you cannot win. Champion Vexthor has never been defeated. He is faster, stronger, and trained in combat since childhood." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "Maybe. But I'm still going to try." Something flickered in Callas's expression. Respect, perhaps. Or curiosity about a species too stubborn to acknowledge the inevitable. The cargo bay had been transformed. Equipment pushed to the walls, impact padding covering the floor, observation platforms erected for both delegations. It looked like an arena, and that's exactly what it was. A place where one species would prove itself superior to another, written in bruises and blood. Marcus stood at one end, wearing simple athletic gear that left his arms and legs bare. The radiation burns were still visible, angry red patches across his skin. He'd spent the night training with Captain Rivera, who had competitive martial arts experience. She'd taught him everything she could, but they both knew it wouldn't be enough. "You don't have to do this," Rivera had said during their final session. "We can find another way." "There is no other way. You know that." Marcus had replied. "The Zenthri respect strength. This is their language. If we don't speak it, we're dismissed as weak. The alliance dies before it begins." Now, facing the assembled witnesses, Marcus regulated his breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The same technique he'd used before combat drops, before raids, before every moment when death was a real possibility. Fear was fine. Panic would kill you. Champion Vexthor entered from the opposite side. The Zenthri warrior was impressive, even by his species standards. Nearly 7 feet tall, his obsidian skin seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Muscle moved beneath that skin like cables under silk. His luminescent eyes held the cold confidence of someone who had never lost. Commander Callas stepped forward to officiate. "This is a trial of strength, witnessed by both peoples. Combat ends when one fighter yields or loses consciousness. Any may surrender without dishonor. This is not battle to the death, but a test of will and capability." He looked at both fighters. "Do you accept these terms?" "I accept," Vexthor's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Accepted," Marcus confirmed. "Then begin." Vexthor moved first, covering the distance between them in 3 long strides. His punch came fast enough that Marcus barely registered it before it connected with his ribs. The impact lifted him off his feet and sent him sprawling backward. Pain exploded through his chest. At least 2 ribs cracked, maybe more. The Zenthri delegation made sounds of approval. The humans watched in tense silence. Marcus rolled to his feet, ignoring the screaming protest from his ribs. He'd taken worse. The improvised explosive device in Kandahar that had thrown him 30 feet into a wall. The training accident that had left him with a punctured lung. Pain was just information. You acknowledged it and kept moving. Vexthor came in again, confident. Marcus didn't try to match his speed or power. Instead, he moved laterally, making the Zenthri adjust his angle of attack. When the next punch came, Marcus slipped inside its arc, too close for the full force to land. He drove his elbow into Vexthor's midsection. It was like hitting reinforced plasteel. The Zenthri's abdominal muscles were hard as armor. But Marcus felt the impact register, saw Vexthor's eyes widen slightly. The human was weaker, yes. But not helpless. They separated, circled. Vexthor's expression had shifted from confidence to focus. He'd expected the human to fold immediately, to prove the Zenthari prejudice correct. Instead, Marcus was still standing, still fighting. The next exchange was faster. Vexthor threw a combination, high punch, low kick, sweeping strike. Marcus blocked what he could, took what he couldn't avoid, and countered wherever possible. Each hit from the Zenthari felt like being struck with a hammer. Each of Marcus's counters barely seemed to register. 3 minutes in, Marcus's face was bleeding from a cut above his eye. His lips were split. The radiation burns on his arms had torn open from the impacts. He'd landed a dozen solid hits on Vexthor and accomplished approximately nothing. But he was still standing. In the observation area, Commander Kalas leaned forward, his luminescent eyes fixed on the human. This should have been over by now. The Zenthari champion should have overwhelmed his opponent in the first minute. Instead, the human kept getting up, kept fighting, kept refusing to acknowledge the inevitable. 5 minutes became 10. Vexthor's movements remained powerful, but they were slowing. The Zenthari were built for overwhelming speed and strength, but not for prolonged effort. Their evolutionary path had favored ambush predators, explosive power over endurance. Humans, on the other hand, had evolved as persistence hunters. They'd chased prey across savannas for hours, running animals to exhaustion. Human muscles were designed to keep functioning long after other species would have collapsed. Marcus saw the shift in Vexthor's breathing and adjusted his strategy. He stopped trying to damage and focused on attrition. Make the Zenthari work, burn energy, force him to think and react and defend. It was a strategy built on accepting punishment, on understanding that survival sometimes meant enduring what shouldn't be endurable. 15 minutes. Vexthor's strikes still had devastating power, but they came less frequently. Sweat glistened on his obsidian skin. His breath came in heavy gasps. Marcus was a mess. Blood ran down his face, his ribs were definitely broken, and his radiation-damaged body screamed with every movement. But his breathing remained controlled. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Just like basic training. Just like every operation where quitting meant dying. 20 minutes. The cargo bay had fallen silent. Both delegations watched with something approaching awe. This wasn't supposed to be possible. The inferior species wasn't supposed to challenge the superior one for this long. Marcus started pressing forward, attacking more aggressively. His strikes weren't powerful enough to knock Vexthor down, but they were constant, relentless. A jab to the body, a kick to the leg, an elbow to the ribs. Death by 1,000 cuts, wearing down an opponent who had assumed his natural advantages would ensure victory. Vexthor threw a desperate haymaker, putting everything into it. Marcus ducked under and stepped inside the Zenthari's guard. This close, Vexthor's reach advantage meant nothing. Marcus drove his shoulder into the champion's chest and swept his legs. They crashed to the mat together. On the ground, the fight changed. Technique mattered more than raw strength. Marcus had trained in ground fighting for years, first in the Marines, then continuing through his engineering career because some habits were too useful to abandon. He got his arms around Vexthor's neck, locking in a chokehold. The Zenthari thrashed, his natural strength terrifying at close range. His hands clawed at Marcus's arms, drawing blood, tearing skin. But Marcus held on, his muscles burning, his damaged body protesting every second of contact. Yield, Marcus gasped. Just tap out. Vexthor's struggles weakened. His luminescent eyes began to dim. His hand, which had been tearing at Marcus's arms, suddenly tapped twice against the mat. Submission. Marcus released immediately and rolled away, his chest heaving. Every part of him hurt. He couldn't remember ever being this exhausted, this thoroughly beaten up. But he'd done it. He'd survived 23 minutes against an opponent who should have destroyed him in 2. Commander Kalas stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Champion Vextor has yielded. The trial is concluded. The human has proven capable. Silence filled the cargo bay. Then, slowly, the Zenthari delegation began performing their gesture of respect, bringing their right hands to their foreheads. First one, then another, then all of them. Even Vextor, still lying on the mat recovering, raised his hand in salute. The human delegation erupted in cheers. Medical teams rushed forward. Dr. Kim reached Marcus first, her professional mask cracking to show genuine relief. "You absolute idiot," she muttered, checking his vitals. "You've reopened half your radiation burns and definitely punctured a lung this time." But everyone saw, Marcus managed through split lips. "Saw that humans, don't quit." "Yes," came Kalas's voice. The Zenthari commander had approached while medical worked. "We saw. And we have learned something today that challenges millennia of assumptions." Marcus looked up at him through swollen eyes. "Yeah. What's that?" "That strength is not merely physical. That will itself can be a form of power." Kalas performed the gesture of respect again. "My people will recommend the alliance, Engineer Chen. You have proven humanity worthy of partnership." They took Marcus to medical, patched him up, and confined him to bed for a week. The radiation damage combined with his new injuries left him in worse shape than after the reactor incident. But Dr. Kim assured him he'd recover, given time and treatment. On the third day, he had a visitor. Commander Kalas entered the medical bay alone, moving with that effortless grace his species possessed. He pulled up a chair beside Marcus's bed and sat in silence for a moment. "I owe you an apology," Kalas said finally. "My species has observed humanity for decades. We noted your fragility, your short lifespans, your physical limitations. We concluded you were inferior. We were wrong." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "You weren't entirely wrong. We are more fragile. We do live shorter lives. Yes. But we failed to recognize what those limitations create. When you nearly killed yourself fixing the reactor, I thought it was foolishness. When you agreed to fight Vextor while still injured, I thought it was pride." Kalas's luminescent eyes met Marcus's. "I understand now. It is neither. It is simply that your species learned long ago that survival requires doing what should be impossible. We call it being stubborn." Kalas made a sound that might have been laughter. "Yes. Stubborn. The Zenthari will need to learn this quality, I think. We have been the superior species for so long, we forgot that superiority can be a weakness. We assumed our natural advantages would always be enough. So the alliance will proceed?" "Yes. With humanity as equal partners, not subordinates." Kalas stood, preparing to leave. Then he paused. "I have a question, if you will permit it." "Go ahead." "When you entered that reactor chamber, knowing you would absorb a fatal dose of radiation. When you agreed to fight Vextor, knowing you could not win. What drove you? Was it duty? Honor?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Neither. It was just necessary. Someone had to fix the reactor. Someone had to accept your trial. I was available and capable enough to try. That's all." "That's all," Kalas repeated softly. "Yes. I believe I am beginning to understand humans, Engineer Chen. Your people do not see themselves as heroes. You simply do what needs doing, regardless of cost. That is perhaps the most terrifying and inspiring quality I have encountered in all my years of diplomacy." He left, and Marcus was alone with his thoughts and his healing body. 2 weeks later, he stood in Outpost Kepler 9's observation deck, watching the formal treaty signing through the window. Captain Rivera and Commander Kalas affixed their marks to the document that would bind their species in partnership. The first real alliance between humans and Zenthari in history. Dr. Kim joined him at the window. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a freight train." Then the train backed up and hit me again. He smiled slightly. But I'll live. Apparently that's what humans do best. Stubborn, Kim agreed. Kalas was asking about you yesterday. Wanted to know if you'd consider serving as a liaison between our peoples. Said humanity needs representatives who understand both our strengths and our limitations. Marcus watched the ceremony below, considering. A new role, new challenges. More opportunities to do what needed doing, regardless of whether it should be possible. Tell him I'll think about it, Marcus said. Beyond the window, stars stretched in every direction, infinite and cold and full of possibility. Humanity had proven itself worthy of walking among them, not through superiority but through simple, stubborn refusal to quit. And that, Marcus reflected, was perhaps the most human quality of all. The weight of stars was heavy. But humanity had learned long ago how to carry heavy things. The end.